The massive ships appeared in Earth's orbit on a Tuesday morning, their hulls gleaming like polished obsidian against the backdrop of space. Admiral Zexari of the Galactic Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Inevitable Conquest, watching the small blue planet through the viewport with something between amusement and contempt. His four arms crossed over his chitinous chest as he observed the primitive world below. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "The humans have detected our presence. They're attempting communication." Zexari's compound eyes glittered with dark humor. "Let them speak. I find it entertaining when lesser species try to bargain for their lives." The communication channel crackled to life, and a human voice filled the bridge. It was calm, almost conversational. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. Welcome to our solar system. We'd like to invite you for diplomatic talks." The bridge fell silent. Several of Zexari's officers exchanged bewildered glances. In their 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever welcomed them. They had faced desperate pleas, threats, attempts at bribery, and even suicide attacks, but never an invitation. Zexari leaned forward, his voice dripping with authority. "I am Admiral Zexari of the Galactic Empire. We are not here for talks. We are here to inform you of your new status as subjects of the Empire. You will surrender your weapons, your governments, and your independence. You have one standard galactic day to comply." There was a pause before the human responded, and when she did, there was something in her voice that made Zexari's skin crawl. It was still calm, but now there was an undercurrent of something else, something that sounded almost like amusement. "Admiral Zexari, that's quite an offer. Before we respond, would you mind if we showed you something? We've prepared a little demonstration of human culture. Think of it as a welcome gift." Zexari was about to refuse when curiosity got the better of him. Throughout the galaxy, conquered species often tried to appeal to the Empire's mercy by showcasing their art or achievements. It was always pathetic, but sometimes amusing. "Very well. You have 5 minutes." The main display screen filled with images of Earth, but these weren't the usual desperate montages of art and music that other species tried to use to prove their worth. Instead, the humans showed something else entirely. They showed their wars. The first image was of humans charging across a muddy field toward machine gun nests, dying by the thousands but never stopping. The narrator's voice was matter-of-fact. "This is from what we call World War I. Humans fought for 4 years. 16 million died. We called it the war to end all wars." Zexari frowned. Why were they showing their defeats? The next scene showed aircraft diving into ships, while explosions bloomed around them. "World War II. 70 million casualties. We developed weapons that could split atoms and level entire cities." More images followed. Humans in spacesuits working on a space station while cosmic radiation sleeted around them. Humans in Arctic conditions, digging through ice with their bare hands to save trapped comrades. Humans running into burning buildings to save strangers. Humans in laboratories working with deadly viruses to find cures. "We are a species," the narrator continued conversationally, "that sends our children to schools where they practice hiding from gunmen. We are a species that voluntarily jumps out of perfectly good aircraft for fun. We are a species that looks at the deepest, darkest parts of the ocean and says, 'I wonder what's down there,' and then goes to find out." The final image was of a human child, barely old enough to walk, fearlessly approaching a massive dog that outweighed her by 50 pounds, arms outstretched for a hug. "We are a species," the voice concluded, "that has never, in our entire history, backed down from a fight. Every predator that ever stalked us, we stalked back. Every disaster that tried to destroy us, we survived. Every challenge that seemed impossible, we made it possible." The screen went black for a moment, and then Admiral Chen's face appeared. She was smiling, but it wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had just realized the sheep it was hunting was actually another wolf. "So, Admiral Zexari," she said pleasantly, "you mentioned something about surrender. I'm afraid I have to give you our official response." She leaned closer to the camera, and her smile grew wider. "No." The transmission ended. Zexari stared at the blank screen, feeling something he hadn't felt in decades: uncertainty. Around him, his bridge crew shifted nervously. Finally, his tactical officer spoke up. "Sir, your orders?" Zexari straightened, pushing down the unfamiliar feeling. He was the conqueror of a dozen worlds, the hammer of the Empire. Some primitive apes with delusions of grandeur wouldn't change that. "Prepare the planetary bombardment cannons," he ordered. "We'll make an example of their largest city. Let's see how defiant they are when their population centers are burning." "Sir," the weapons officer reported, "bombardment cannons are charging. Target locked on the settlement they call New York. Ready to fire on your command." Zexari raised one of his 4 arms. "Fire." The massive energy beam lanced down from the inevitable conquest, capable of turning a mountain into glass. It struck the city's shields and dispersed. The beam scattered across the energy barrier like water hitting a stone. "What?" Zexari's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Impossible. Our bombardment cannons can crack continental plates. How are they deflecting our fire?" His science officer was frantically running calculations. "Sir, their shield technology it's unlike anything in our database. It appears to be based on controlled gravitational fields rather than energy deflection." Before Zexari could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Sir!" his tactical officer shouted. "We're detecting multiple launches from the planet's surface. Hundreds of them." "Missiles?" "Unknown, sir. They're too small to be effective weapons against our shields, but, sir, they're not heading for us. They're spreading throughout the system." Zexari watched as the tiny objects deployed from the planet like seeds from a flower. Within minutes, they had spread throughout the inner solar system, taking up positions near asteroids, moons, and planetary bodies. "Admiral Chen is hailing us again, sir." "Put her through." The human admiral appeared on screen, still smiling that unsettling smile. "Admiral Zexari, I hope you don't mind that we took the liberty of preparing for your visit. You see, humans have this saying, 'If you want peace, prepare for war.'" "What are those objects you launched?" "Oh, those?" Chen's smile became almost predatory. "Those are what we call asteroid pushers. Each one is equipped with a small fusion engine and a guidance system. We've attached them to approximately 300 asteroids and comets throughout our solar system." Zexari felt his blood turn to ice. "You wouldn't dare." "Admiral, 3 billion years ago, an asteroid 10 kilometers across hit our planet and ended the age of the dinosaurs. It was a planet-wide extinction event that nearly sterilized all life on Earth." Chen's voice remained conversational, as if she were discussing the weather. "We've just put engines on asteroids much larger than that." The tactical display updated, showing the true scope of what the humans had done. Asteroids throughout the system were beginning to move, their trajectories carefully calculated. Some were aimed at empty space, but others... "The asteroid designated 2087 Tango is 47 kilometers across," Chen continued pleasantly. "It's currently heading for a point in space approximately where your fleet will be in 6 hours, assuming you maintain current position. Oh, and Admiral, we've done the math. At its current velocity, it carries the kinetic energy equivalent of about 40 million fusion bombs." Zexari's tactical officer was running his own calculations, his face growing paler by the second. "Sir, she's not bluffing. The trajectory is perfect. If we stay in position, the asteroid will arrive in 5 hours and 53 minutes. "We can destroy asteroids," Zexari said. though his voice lacked its previous confidence. "Of course you can," Chen agreed. "You can probably destroy quite a few of them. But all 300? While they're accelerating toward different targets? And Admiral, if you start shooting down asteroids, you might want to consider this. We've been very careful about debris patterns. If you shatter asteroid 2087 Tango, the pieces will spread out in a cone. A cone that includes your entire fleet." Zexari realized with growing horror that the humans had turned their own solar system into a weapon. Every asteroid, every comet, every piece of space debris could potentially be aimed at his fleet, and the humans had had decades to prepare, to calculate, to plan. "This is madness," he whispered. "No, Admiral," Chen replied, and for the first time her smile faded. "This is humanity. We are the species that looked at the most devastating force in our planet's history and decided to turn it into a weapon. We are the species that saw extinction coming and said, 'Not today.'" She leaned forward again, and her eyes were as cold as space itself. "You wanted to conquer Earth, Admiral, but you made one crucial mistake. You assumed we would fight you the way other species have fought you. You assumed we would play by your rules." The transmission ended again, leaving Zexari staring at a tactical display that showed his entire fleet surrounded by incoming asteroids. Each one was a planet killer, and Admiral Zexari had faced down rebel fleets and crushed independence movements across a dozen star systems. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. His flagship shuddered as it maneuvered away from the incoming asteroid, its massive engines straining against the gravitational pull of the approaching mountain of rock and ice. "Fleet status report," he barked, all four of his arms gripping the command console. 16 ships have successfully evaded their primary targets, sir," his tactical officer reported, his voice tight with stress. "But the humans are adjusting trajectories on the remaining asteroids." "They're hurting us, sir." Zexari's compound eyes tracked the tactical display with growing dread. The humans weren't just throwing rocks at them. They were conducting the most precise space battle he had ever witnessed, using asteroids as weapons with surgical accuracy. Each time his fleet moved to avoid one threat, they found themselves in the path of another. "Sir," his communications officer called out. "Incoming transmission from the human admiral." "Put her through." Admiral Chen appeared on screen, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood figures that Zexari recognized from the intelligence briefings, leaders of various human nations. But there was something different about them now. They weren't the divided, squabbling primitives that Imperial intelligence had described. They stood unified. And every single one of them wore the same unsettling smile. "Admiral Zexari," Chen said pleasantly, "I hope our little demonstration has been educational. But before we continue, I'd like you to meet some friends of mine." An elderly human stepped forward, his hair silver but his eyes sharp as laser cutters. "I am General Harrison, Strategic Command. I helped plan the defense of the Himalayan Pass against superior forces. We held for 6 months while outnumbered 30-1. Another human, a woman with scars across her face, spoke next. "Admiral Rodriguez, Naval Operations. I commanded submarine warfare in the Antarctic campaign. We operated under 2 miles of ice for 8 months without surface contact." One by one, each human introduced themselves. A pilot who had flown missions through radiation storms. A Marine who had held a position for 72 hours without reinforcement. A scientist who had worked with live bioweapons to develop countermeasures. Zexari felt a chill running through his exoskeleton. These weren't politicians or diplomats. These were warriors, all of them. And they were telling him that Earth's entire leadership consisted of beings who had proven themselves in combat against impossible odds. "You see, Admiral," Chen continued, "we've been preparing for this day for quite some time. Not just since you arrived, but for decades, centuries really. Humans have always known that someday someone stronger would come calling. It's happened before in our history. The question was never if, but when and how we would respond. The display behind her changed, showing a three-dimensional map of human space. But it wasn't just Earth. Zexari saw installations on the Moon, on Mars, in the asteroid belt, on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. The humans had militarized their entire solar system. What you're seeing, General Harrison explained, is the product of 200 years of preparation. Every human colony, every research station, every mining operation has been designed with defense in mind. We are not just one planet, Admiral. We are an integrated fortress system spanning 8 planets and 47 moons. Impossible, Zexari breathed. Our intelligence showed that humans were barely capable of interplanetary travel. Admiral Rodriguez laughed, and it was not a pleasant sound. Your intelligence saw what we wanted you to see. Every species that has ever achieved interstellar travel has sent scouts to our system. We've been tracking them for over a century. We learned from each one. We adapted. The display changed again, this time showing recordings of various alien scout ships. Zexari recognized several Empire vessel designs among them, as well as ships from other galactic powers. All of them had been observed, tracked, and apparently studied in detail. The Carillion Empire visited us 87 years ago, Chen said casually. Their scouts spent 3 months cataloging what they thought were our capabilities. They saw cities, agriculture, primitive spacecraft. They never suspected that those primitive spacecraft were actually scanning their ships with technology they couldn't detect. The Zephyrian Confederacy sent a probe 15 years ago, Harrison added. It transmitted detailed scans of our defensive capabilities back to their command. They measured our radar arrays, our missile silos, our orbital platforms. What they didn't realize was that we'd built those installations specifically to be detected. The real defenses were invisible to their scans. Zexari's mind reeled. The humans had been conducting counterintelligence operations against multiple galactic civilizations for over a century. They had deliberately appeared weak while building strength in secret. But why reveal this now? He demanded. Why show your hand? Chen's smile turned razor sharp. Because, Admiral, it's time for the next phase of human expansion. Before Zexari could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout his ship. His science officer looked up from his console with an expression of pure terror. Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the outer system. Something's coming in from beyond Pluto. The tactical display updated to show new contacts emerging from what humans called the Kuiper Belt. But these weren't asteroids. These were ships, human ships, and there were hundreds of them. Impossible, Zexari whispered. Our long-range scans showed no industrial capacity beyond the inner planets. That's because you weren't looking in the right places, Chen replied. Humans have been building ships in the outer dark for 50 years. Hidden shipyards in asteroid hollows, manufacturing plants inside dead comets. Construction facilities on moons so far from the sun that your sensors couldn't distinguish them from natural objects. The human fleet was unlike anything in Zexari's experience. The ships were sleek, predatory things that seemed to bend light around their hulls. They moved with impossible precision, their formations flowing like flocks of birds, but with the deadly intent of hunting wolves. Admiral, his tactical officer reported, voice cracking with stress. The human fleet is surrounding us. They're not just blocking escape routes. They're forming a perfect sphere around our position. Zexari watched as the human ships took up positions at precisely calculated intervals. It was a formation that no computer could have calculated in real time, which meant the humans had planned this entire engagement in advance. They had known exactly where his fleet would be and how they would react to each phase of the battle. How long have you been planning this? He asked, though part of him already dreaded the answer. Planning what, Admiral? Chen asked innocently. Planning to defend our world? We've been doing that since the first human looked at the stars and wondered what might be looking back. Planning this specific engagement? Oh, that started the moment our deep space sensors detected your fleet entering the system 6 months ago. 6 months ago? Zexari's voice rose to a pitch that made several of his officers wince. We only entered this system 3 days ago. General Harrison stepped forward, his scarred face grim. Admiral, your fleet has been under observation since you passed through the Centauri relay. We've been tracking your course, your speed, your probable intentions, and your fleet composition for half a year. Every asteroid we positioned was placed with the knowledge of exactly where your ships would be when you arrived. The scope of the human operation was staggering. They had conducted intelligence gathering and strategic planning on a scale that rivaled the Empire's best military minds. But more than that, they had done it while appearing to be a primitive pre-contact civilization. This is all very impressive, Zexari said, trying to regain some measure of authority. But you're still one system against the entire galactic empire. Even if you destroy my fleet, more will come. Larger fleets. The Empire has resources you cannot imagine. For the first time since the conversation began, Admiral Chen's smile faltered. Not with fear, but with something that looked almost like pity. Admiral, she said softly, do you really think Earth is the only human world? The tactical display changed one final time, and Zexari felt his heart stop beating. The screen showed star maps extending far beyond the Sol system. Dozens of systems, hundreds of systems, all marked with the distinctive blue and white symbol of human colonies. You see, Admiral, Chen continued, her voice now carrying a tone of infinite sadness, humans have been exploring the galaxy for much longer than any of your species realized. We've been spreading quietly, carefully, always staying just below the threshold that would trigger a response from the major powers. We've been learning, adapting, growing stronger. Every time one of your scout fleets disappeared, you assumed it was pirates or equipment failure, Admiral Rodriguez added. You never considered that a primitive species might be capturing your ships to study your technology. You never imagined that we might be reverse engineering your faster-than-light drives, your weapons systems, your communication networks. General Harrison gestured to the star map. 237 human colonies, Admiral. Some of them have been established for over a century. All of them hidden. All of them armed. All of them connected by a communication network that your people helped us build by unknowingly providing the technology. Zexari stared at the map, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. If this was true, then the humans weren't just one stubborn world refusing to submit to imperial authority. They were a hidden empire that had been growing in secret for generations, an empire that had used the Galactic Empire's own technology to build a military force that could rival any of the major powers. You're lying, he said desperately. This is impossible. Our surveillance networks would have detected such an expansion. Would they? Chen asked. Admiral, your surveillance networks are designed to detect known technologies and signatures. They look for the energy patterns of ships and civilizations that you understand. But what if a species developed completely different technologies? What if they built ships that your sensors couldn't recognize as artificial objects? What if they powered their colonies with energy sources that don't register on your detection grids? She gestured to her own ship, visible through the viewport as it glided silently through space. Human vessels don't use fusion or antimatter, Admiral. We discovered something much better, something that makes our ships invisible to every scanning technology used by every major galactic power. What? Zexari whispered. Chen's smile returned, and this time it was the smile of a teacher explaining a simple lesson to a slow student. We learned to harness dark energy, Admiral, the force that makes up 70% of the universe, the force that every advanced civilization ignores because they think it can't be contained or controlled. The implications crashed over Zexari like a collapsing star. Dark energy was everywhere in the universe, invisible and undetectable by conventional means. If 3 hours later, Admiral Zexari found himself in a position that no Imperial officer had ever experienced. He was aboard a human vessel, not as a conqueror, but as a guest. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was safer here than on his own flagship, which was still dodging asteroids in a carefully choreographed dance of destruction. The human ship's interior was unlike anything he had seen before. Where Imperial vessels were built for intimidation, with harsh lighting and angular surfaces designed to remind everyone of their place in the hierarchy, the human ship felt almost organic. Curved corridors flowed like rivers, and the lighting was warm and natural. It didn't feel like a warship at all, until you noticed the subtle details, the reinforced bulkheads, the emergency systems, the weapon ports disguised as decorative elements. "Impressive, isn't it?" Admiral Chen said as she led him through the corridors. "Human ship designers learned early that people fight better when they feel at home. Our vessels are built to be lived in, not just operated." They entered what humans called the Situation Room, where holographic displays showed the current state of affairs across the galaxy. Zexari's compound eyes widened as he saw the scope of the human operation. It wasn't just 17 Imperial systems. Human fleets had appeared in over 50 systems belonging to various galactic powers, all at precisely the same moment. "Coordination," he muttered, using an old Imperial term for military operations so perfectly timed that they seemed supernatural. "We prefer the term symphony," General Harrison said from across the room. "Each movement precisely timed, each note contributing to the overall harmony." "Or discord, depending on your perspective," Admiral Rodriguez added with dark humor. The displays showed reactions from across the galaxy. The Corellian Empire had mobilized their home fleet, but had stopped short of actually engaging the human vessels. The Zephyrian Confederacy was demanding emergency sessions with their governing council. 3 minor empires had already sent formal diplomatic overtures to the human fleets in their territory. "You've destabilized the entire galactic order," Zexari said, though there was a note of admiration in his voice despite himself. "We've revealed that the galactic order was never as stable as everyone believed," Chen corrected. "For millennia, the major powers have maintained their positions through the assumption that no new players could emerge without being detected and eliminated early. That assumption was flawed." She gestured to another display showing detailed analyses of galactic military capabilities. "Every major power has been preparing to fight the last war, Admiral. Your tactics, your strategies, your technologies are all designed to counter known threats. But what happens when a completely unknown threat emerges?" Zexari studied the displays, his tactical mind automatically analyzing the information. What he saw there made his blood run cold. The humans hadn't just built a secret empire. They had built it specifically to counter the known weaknesses of every major galactic power. Imperial ships relied on heavy armor and massive firepower. Human ships were fast, agile, and seemed to be built around technologies that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. The Corellian Empire dominated through superior numbers and coordinated fleet actions. Human forces appeared to be organized in small, independent units that could operate autonomously without central command. The Zephyrian Confederacy maintained control through information warfare and surveillance networks. The humans had obviously learned to operate completely outside those networks. "You studied us," he realized. "All of us. You identified our strengths and built strategies to neutralize them." "We studied everyone," General Harrison confirmed. "Humans have been doing that since we first developed agriculture. We watch, we learn, we adapt. It's kept us alive on a planet where everything else was bigger, stronger, and better armed than we were." Admiral Rodriguez brought up another display, this one showing Earth's evolutionary history. Our world didn't give us claws or fangs or natural armor, Admiral. It gave us something much more valuable. It taught us to think our way out of impossible situations. The display showed predators that had once hunted early humans. Giant cats with teeth like daggers, bears larger than modern vehicles, pack hunters with intelligence rivaling early human tribes. All extinct now, while humans had spread across their world and eventually to the stars. Every species that has ever threatened humanity has made the same mistake, Chen said quietly. They assumed that because we looked weak, we were weak. They never considered that we might be using that apparent weakness as camouflage while we prepared for war. But this isn't war, Zexari observed. You could have destroyed our fleets, all of our fleets, from what I'm seeing here. But you haven't fired a shot. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. That's because humans learned something important during our own world's conflicts. Destroying an enemy is easy. Living with them afterward is much harder. We're not here to conquer the galaxy, Admiral. We're here to join it. But on our terms. She brought up a new display, this one showing a proposed reorganization of galactic power structures. Instead of the traditional empire-based system, it showed a complex network of alliances, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. At the center of it all was humanity, not as rulers, but as mediators. You want to become the galactic government, Zexari said, his voice heavy with realization. No, Harrison corrected. We want to prevent the need for galactic government. Empires rise and fall, Admiral. They always have, they always will. But what if there was a force in the galaxy dedicated to maintaining balance? What if someone was watching to make sure that no single power ever became strong enough to dominate all the others? The scope of human ambition was staggering. They weren't seeking conquest or control. They were positioning themselves as the ultimate peacekeepers, the force that would prevent any future galactic wars by ensuring that no empire could ever achieve the kind of dominance that the major powers currently enjoyed. That's impossible, Zexari protested. The galaxy is too large, too diverse. No single species could maintain that kind of balance. You're right, Chen agreed. No single species could. But humans aren't planning to do it alone. The displays changed again, showing detailed information about dozens of minor species scattered across the galaxy. Species that had been conquered, absorbed, or marginalized by the major empires. Species that had been written off as unimportant or primitive. For the past century, humans have been making contact with every species that the major powers have overlooked, Admiral Rodriguez explained. Species that were deemed too small to matter, too primitive to be threats, too remote to be valuable. We've been offering them something that no major power ever has: genuine partnership. Zexari saw the true scope of human planning for the first time. They hadn't just built a secret empire. They had built a secret alliance that spanned the entire galaxy. Hundreds of species, all connected through human mediation, all sharing technology and resources, all working together toward common goals. The Kelthari miners in the Outer Rim, Chen said, highlighting one group on the display. The Empire considers them too primitive to exploit, but they've developed mining techniques that can extract resources from asteroids that Imperial technology can't touch. The Vishari musicians in the Crab Nebula create art that can influence emotional states across species barriers. The Tholian engineers near the galactic core have developed construction techniques that can build structures in zero-gravity environments without any external support. Each species contributes what they do best, Harrison added, and humans coordinate between them, sharing discoveries and innovations across the entire network. The result is a collective technological base that advances faster than any single empire could manage. Zexari realized with growing awe that humans had essentially reverse-engineered the entire concept of galactic civilization. Instead of conquering and dominating, they had built a voluntary association based on mutual benefit. Instead of forcing lesser species to serve them, they had elevated those species and incorporated their unique abilities into a collective whole. "This is why you're revealing yourselves now," he said slowly. "You're not challenging the Empire. You're making the Empire irrelevant." "We're offering the Empire a choice," Chen corrected. "Join the network as an equal partner, or become increasingly isolated as the rest of the galaxy moves beyond the Empire model." The communication console chimed, and Admiral Rodriguez moved to answer it. After a brief conversation in the liquid, musical language that humans used among themselves, she turned back to the group. "Admiral, we're receiving responses from Imperial High Command. They're requesting immediate negotiations." Chen nodded. "And the other powers?" "The Carillions want to send diplomatic representatives. The Zephyrians are offering to open their communication networks to human negotiators. The minor empires are asking how quickly they can join the Alliance network." Zexari felt the weight of history settling around him. This was the moment when the old galactic order ended and something entirely new began. The empire that had seemed eternal just days ago was now scrambling to adapt to a new reality where they were no longer the dominant force in local space. "What happens to my fleet?" he asked, though part of him suspected he already knew the answer. "That depends," Chen said gently, "on what you choose to do next. We're not interested in prisoners or hostages, Admiral. Your people are free to leave whenever they wish. But we are interested in allies." She brought up one final display, this one showing detailed plans for integrating Imperial technology with human innovations. Not to replace Imperial systems, but to improve them. The plans included provisions for joint research projects, shared exploration missions, and mutual defense agreements. "Humans have a saying," General Harrison said. "The best way to destroy an enemy is to make them a friend. We'd rather have the Empire as a partner than as an opponent." Zexari studied the plans, his tactical mind analyzing the proposed arrangements from every angle. What he saw there was nothing less than a complete transformation of how galactic civilization functioned. Instead of competing empires constantly preparing for war, there would be cooperative networks, constantly preparing for exploration and discovery. "And if the Empire refuses?" Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes reminded Zexari that he was dealing with a species that had survived ice ages, planetary bombardments, and their own attempts at self-destruction. "Then the Empire becomes an island in an ocean of cooperation," she said simply. "Eventually, islands erode." The conversation was interrupted by urgent chiming from the tactical display. Admiral Rodriguez quickly brought up the alert, and her expression shifted to one of concern. "Admiral Chen," she said formally, "we're detecting massive fleet movements in the Andromeda relay sector. Multiple unknown signatures, much larger than anything in our databases." Chen's expression grew grim as she studied the sensor readings. "How long until they reach inhabited systems?" "At current velocity, 6 months. But Admiral, they're not heading for any of the major population centers. Their course suggests they're avoiding all known civilizations entirely." Zexari found himself automatically moving to study the tactical display, his military instincts overriding his status as a prisoner. What he saw there made his heart skip a beat. "Those formation patterns," he said slowly. "I've seen them before. In Imperial archaeological records. They match descriptions of the Devourer fleets from the Third Epoch." The room fell silent. Every sentient species in the galaxy knew the stories of the Devourers, the extragalactic force that had appeared periodically throughout galactic history to harvest entire star systems before disappearing back into the void. Most had assumed they were myths. Chen turned to face Zexari directly, and for the first time since their confrontation had begun, her expression was completely serious. "Admiral," she said quietly, It appears that the galaxy is about to face a threat that makes our current political arrangements seem rather trivial. The question is, do we face it as enemies, or do we face it together? Zexari looked around the room at the human officers, then back at the display showing the approaching threat. For 3,000 years, the Empire had dominated local space through superior firepower and ruthless efficiency. But looking at the scope of what was approaching, he realized that no single empire would be sufficient to meet this challenge. The humans had spent centuries preparing for this moment, building alliances and developing technologies specifically designed to counter threats that conventional military thinking couldn't address. They had turned their apparent weakness into strength, their isolation into preparation, and their humanity into the foundation for something entirely new. "Admiral Chen," he said formally, "I believe the Galactic Empire would be very interested in discussing the terms of this alliance you've proposed." For the first time in their entire encounter, Admiral Chen's smile was genuine and warm. "Welcome to the future, Admiral Zexari. Let's get to work." Ons had truly learned to harness it. Then they could power entire civilizations without leaving any energy signature that existing technology could recognize. "This is why we're revealing ourselves now," Chen said gently. "Because it's time for humanity to take its place among the galactic powers. Not as subjects, not as conquered territory, but as equals." Zexari's tactical officer chose that moment to deliver the final blow. "Sir, we're receiving reports from Imperial Command. Multiple human fleets have appeared simultaneously in 17 Imperial systems. They're not attacking, sir. They're just there, waiting." The human admiral nodded. "We're offering the Empire a choice, Admiral Zexari. The same choice we're offering to every major galactic power. Coexistence and mutual respect, or—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The asteroids were still closing in. The human fleet still held them in an inescapable formation. And now it was clear that this was happening simultaneously across dozens of Imperial worlds. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Empire, an alien species was dictating terms to them. And they were doing it with a smile. There were hundreds of them. His communications officer spoke up nervously. "Sir, we're receiving a message from the Empire High Command. They're demanding a status report." Zexari continued staring at the display, watching as the asteroid trajectories updated in real time. The humans weren't just threatening his fleet. They were demonstrating that they could destroy any target in the solar system with pinpoint accuracy. And if they could do this in their own system, what could they do if they ever reached the stars? For the first time in his military career, Admiral Zexari of the Galactic Empire found himself in a position he had never experienced before. He was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and completely at the mercy of an enemy who had just proven they were willing to use weapons that could sterilize planets. The humans had said no to surrender. But as Zexari watched the asteroids closing in on his position, he was beginning to realize that he might soon have to consider an option that no Imperial admiral had ever been forced to contemplate: retreat.